Dune Awakening. From the guys that brought you an extremely grindy game in the Conan universe, comes an extremely grindy game in the Dune universe. It's a game that I'm kind of ashamed of getting very addicted to, because the whole time playing I knew what it was, but I kept going anyway. Why did I keep going? Well, it's three things. One is that I've read the Dune books and it's cool to actually see Dune on the ground in a video game. And I enjoyed seeing bits and pieces of Dune lore in the missions I was doing and the items I was using. So I was definitely falling for the jazz hands of Dune words being spoken at me as a distraction from the fact that I was about to do the same loop that I had just done 40 times again. 2. As I played the game, I just kept feeling the potential of how good the game could be. And I kept saying to myself, when I get closer to the end game, it will be better. And in some respects, it does get better. But it didn't live up to that potential I kept feeling. 3. I am a hamster. Put me in a wheel and I will run. And this is a hamster wheel. Let's just get into it and hope I start making more sense. Like and subscribe if I do. Premise. This is an alternate Dune timeline where Paul Atreides isn't born. Instead, his parents have a daughter. This also somehow causes the Imperial Death Squad to genocide the Fremen, and some of them go into hiding, which causes hundreds of thousands of player characters getting sent to Arrakis, the Dune planet, to find the Fremen. You are one of those guys, and after a job interview with an HR representative, you get sent on your way to Arrakis to find the Fremen. But your plane gets shot down, and then the guy that shot your plane down comes and rescues you, and gives you a tutorial on how to survive Arrakis. And you're friends now, I guess. I'd be pretty upset with that guy, but okay. Guess the player character didn't know. Then that guy fights a Sardaukar or something and leaves you. Now you have to survive Arrakis and find the Fremen. Gameplay. So pretty cool so far. From the first hour you feel like you're gonna have lots of Dune story and a lot of action. And no, not really. What you will actually be doing is grinding. A hamster on a wheel. What you're really doing is gathering materials to build up a base, unlocking a tech tree, leveling up and upgrading your gear. Gathering materials highlights one of the better parts of the game, so let's start with that. There are a bunch of materials to get. You get materials mainly through mining or looting. For mining, you equip your mining laser and analyze a rock, and then it makes a pattern you have to follow. And if you hit that, then it harvests the whole rock. Which is great, it makes mining more interactive. But there have been moments where the blue pattern appears basically in the ground and I can't get to it. Which sucks. For mining, at least at first, there isn't much running around needed since most resources will be plentiful close to where you can build your base. But you will need to do a lot more running around for it later. Which isn't as bad as it could be, since traversal is executed pretty well here. Sprinting doesn't drain your stamina outside of combat, which is a plus, but then it becomes good because of the abilities and suspensor belts. Like the sprint ability that just runs very fast is already good. But then you climb up a cliff and you have your suspensor belt on, and you use that sprint ability off the cliff, and then hold the jump button down. And now you can fly because of the suspensor belt. That is awesome. I loved doing that. It also works when climbing cliffs, so you jump up and the suspensor takes you further. But then grappling hook plus suspensor belt and you are flying up the cliff. This is great. This traversal stuff is awesome. And they should build more on that because it is the game's greatest strength. You also get vehicles, and I really only used the bike, and that works pretty good, but I felt it drifted too easily, which is a pretty minor complaint. Looting takes us into combat, because almost all of the loot will be guarded. The combat is fine. The melee combat is janky and okay at best. But the shooting works good. I just started using only guns because they work so much better. And it's because of shields. In melee you would have to hold the mouse button to break the shield, and that worked only sometimes. Or sometimes you have to do it more often, and there's no real feedback on the progression of combat. You don't know how much, if any, damage your attack did. You know it did some damage, and with non-shielded enemies that's fine, because you just keep attacking until they die. But shields regenerate, so you need to know if you're actually making good progress on breaking the shield, or if you're managing to get damage through it. And with melee, shields were always a huge struggle. It took like a minute or two to kill a shielded enemy, and that's probably also down to how laggy the game was for me. That's why always online single player games that pretend to be multiplayer games suck, by the way. But melee combat was janky. It felt like it clearly wasn't working as intended. And the lock-on thing on attacks just wouldn't work properly sometimes. And you have to deal with the annoying stamina bar. And the shield breaking attack not breaking shield. It was just infinitely better to just blast shield guys with a kill shield guy gun, like the drill or submachine gun thing. So at that point, this is just a third-person shooter, and an okay one. Shooting works, and you just have to change guns for the two enemy types, shielded and not shielded. There are compatibilities, but I felt like none of them were impactful enough to actually use. Like I tried grenades and some other explodey ability, and it felt like it did absolutely nothing. So I just shoot gun exclusively. The abilities were just not impressive. So clearly I'm not here for the combat. So why am I here? One word: Dune. The developers captured Dune really well in being strange and interesting. Where the books did good on the political games, intrigue and strange desert magic cultures, this game delivers on the intrigue, because the Fremen are gone and you're trying to find out why, and it delivers on the strangeness. And the best way it does that is with the worms and sandstorms. Traveling across the desert with the dread of the sandworm hanging over you makes every run for materials much more interesting, because you plan your route around that, and you also have to avoid quicksand and drum sand, because you sink in quicksand and drum sand calls the worm, and being loud calls the worm, and existing on the sand calls the worm. It's really quite something to see that giant worm pop out of the sand. The threat of the worm was a big thing in the books, and they implemented that threat well here. It's not an ever-present threat, it's only a threat if you're on the sand. If you are close to a rock formation, then you are safe, probably. You decide the path you take because of the worm when traveling, and you consider the worm when harvesting flower sand, and then later spice. The worm kept getting pissed off when I harvested flower sand, so you just have to run away fast enough. The sandstorm occasionally just blows through the entire map and you have to find shelter or you start losing health. It certainly looks cool and keeps things interesting. Like you see it coming in and you start looking for a crevice in the rock formations around you that you can hide in, or just get as fast as you can to a house. There was also some weird big storm that just made everything windy and grey. And that was good, because variety is the spice of life. Remember, we are still talking about looting, but also how well the devs did the Dune IP. And that's where we get into where you are looting. The broken down ships, old research centers, and the big enemy camps. Of the ones I got to, I felt like everyone was a little different. So not just a copy-paste job all over the place. And they all felt alien, like the architecture was strange and it just felt alien. Now, finally actually looting. It's executed well. Every piece of loot is useful, whether it's the materials or the gear you get. Throughout the game you will use all materials, like the loot you get from those ships and research centers will be useful to you across tiers. And it's obvious where the loot is, and you get a decent amount of it from each place. The one annoyance was that your inventory never gets bigger. Sure, you get vehicles and they can have inventory which you can dump into. The drawback is you would have to leave your vehicle outside in the sun, where it can deteriorate and then die. Vehicles are expensive to make, so I'm not doing that. But you can't upgrade your character inventory, so it's the same inventory from level 1 to level 100. But you usually manage to get enough crap in there to leave you satisfied. So it's tolerable. And lastly, the water. It's an important part because in the Dune books it was so scarce and preserving it was a huge part of Fremen culture. To the point that spitting at someone was a sign of respect. Which makes it strange how easy it is to get in the game. Which is a good thing actually, because if it was really scarce then it would be annoying, because you use it so much. You harvest it from the dew on plants and from moisture in the wind or blood. Yes, in Dune, people are materials. So every time you kill someone, you grab a syringe and harvest some of their blood. Throw it in the blood purifier and congratulations, now you have 1 bar of water. Water stops being a thing to worry about pretty much immediately. I never even needed to make wind traps. The blood was enough. Plus the wind traps are stupid expensive. Okay, I think the last part is the base building, and it's pretty good. Like, thinking about it, I don't really have any real complaints about actually building it. Other than I'd just like to immediately place a wall instead of placing a blueprint and then holding mouse down on the blueprint to actually make the wall. And I would really like half floors, so that I can have a wall of chests. Another one is I deleted the foundation that storage chests were on and the items in the storage chest disappeared. There was no warning that this might happen, and stuff didn't drop on the ground. Nope, it just disappeared. I like this game, but I also hate this game. One annoyance with bases is players putting bases right on a path a lot of people will likely travel, just making a base to be in your way. But because of the traversal, it's a very minor inconvenience, because you just climb over it instantly. The base holds all the progression, with the levels just kinda helping a little through abilities. So in your base you will have storage, crafting and refinement machines. I always struggled with placing them in a straight line. There is probably some snapping hotkey that I missed, so it might be my fault. Again, on its own the base building and machines are fine. Build the machines to craft your gear and then research better crafting machines to make better gear. It's a standard and enjoyable loop, and like every other game like this, as you progress, materials get more complex in refining and crafting, and the process becomes more time-consuming. Like needing 2 or 3 different materials to make a new type of ingot, and then a tool or some gear will need 3 to 5 materials. So like some ingots and then some other refined thing and then something else you would get from the spaceship maybe. And that turns into having to do 3 to 4 runs just to craft one thing, and it gets so tiresome. Sure, traversal is great, which is why it took so long to get tired of the game. But eventually you get tired of the constant grind. Because it's like 30 minutes going to a place, then maybe 20 minutes of fighting and looting, and then 30 minutes going back. And at some point, traversal is no longer a challenge or interesting, and you're just going through the motions. A run is like an hour and it just saps your energy. Like I would do a run and then once back at base, I would just stare at the screen, deciding if I had the energy for another run or not, and as I progressed, the runs got longer and longer, and I was able to stomach them less and less. But I kept going because of sunk cost fallacy, and I wanted the ornithopter. The ornithopter was kind of a disappointment. I thought I would fly around in it, but actually you climb up in altitude and then glide to where you wanna go. And yeah, that shortens the run significantly. But once I got the ornithopter, I did the calculation in my head that the rest of the game would just be more runs, and I have had enough. Like, there are parts of the gameplay that are good, like reviving yourself is great, you don't just instantly die, which is good if there was some stupid reason you died, and the traversal is good, but the game still has that janky, unpolished feel. And the climbing wouldn't work properly sometimes. Like I'd clip into a wall and get stuck, and the combat was okay. Just barely engaging. Like it had so much potential to me of being like a sword master and having these weird Dune abilities, becoming some weirdo ninja. But the combat is too janky to pull that off. And it was just annoying to attempt it. So I settled for an okay third-person shooter, and ignored the abilities, plus it worked better with the constant lag. I want to explain things better than just saying game janky therefore dislike, but sometimes you just feel it when playing. The game does something different than what you think intuitively should happen based on what you see. And I think the game being multiplayer is at fault for a lot of that. Online sucks. I played the game close to release and there was constant lag. Sometimes it was minor, just a tiny bit of rubber banding. And sometimes I felt like the game server was actually located on a rice farm in China. Just moving a bit was a Herculean task, because the game would keep slapping me backwards. And this lag and rubber banding could be a big reason why the game felt so janky. Like in combat, maybe the damage I was doing wasn't getting updated properly, or hits didn't get properly registered. And I saw a great example of that. There was an NPC that could damage me, but I could not damage them. Logging out and back in fixed that though, but the lag remained, and it got especially bad over one weekend. And I just began to hate the game because it was so annoying. The lag seems to have gotten better. You can call it growing pains, but I call it giving me a very poor impression of the game. And I was also dealing with a lot of crashing. I had multiple crashes to desktop, near constant crashes while looking at the map. If this is happening, then your game is not ready. Don't release it. The crashing might have been happening because of BattleEye. At least that's what I saw online. And that wouldn't happen in a single player game. The crashing led to me dying once, another reason to hate online, and why I'll never play hardcore modes in online games. So you die and maybe you lose your stuff and have to respawn far away because the game crashed. Great. In 60 hours with the game I have had pretty much no social interaction with anyone. It only happened once. Sure, there are PvP areas which pit players against each other, but I saw nothing that would bring them together naturally. And it just leaves me feeling that the game would have been much better as a single player game, because the multiplayer aspect is so underutilized here. The one benefit of always online is that my aluminum keeps getting processed even if I turn the game off. The drawback is that my power will run out even if no material is getting processed, and I'll have to start my session by refilling my generators. Yeah, I don't like online live service games. PvP and the idea of the deep desert. Generally, I don't like PvP in games like these, and the combat was already not that enjoyable as PvE, so PvP was probably gonna be worse. There is a reason why the developers are changing the deep desert from a strictly PvP area to a half and half PvE and PvP area. The reason is that people were not enjoying the PvP. The main reason I saw online was that gangs of PvPers would just hunt for solo PvEers, and the solo wouldn't be able to do much. And of the videos I've seen about the game, people would say that on the ground PvP isn't something that happens much. Instead, it would be ornithopter fights. The ornithopter is incredibly expensive and I'm not risking it. And why wouldn't I just play War Thunder for aerial combat? The deep desert, again, an idea with a lot of potential, going deep into the desert to find old ruins and spice and some weird stuff. And it would be challenging in the survival aspect. But in execution, it sounds like it's just constant running away from kill player because it's funny gangs. And that doesn't sound very fun. And seems like a weak premise for the PvP to me, especially when people are joining the Atreides faction or the Harkonnens. Why isn't the PvP a war between the Harkonnens and Atreides, instead of just a free-for-all? I mean, you could have both. Give us some structured PvP of Harkonnen versus Atreides, and the unstructured PvP of the free-for-all. Like, okay, here's an idea. On a timer in the capital city of a house, there will be a ship going to the deep desert, where the house is going to stake a claim or gather resources. And you go on that ship, and when you get to the desert with your faction, you would have to fight the other faction over objectives and resources. Like, you could be fighting to hold a point, or you could just go around gathering resources and bringing it back to the ship. But this would be essentially a mode with guaranteed PvP, and it should be less punishing than dying alone in the deep desert. So that this would be a somewhat safe way to practice becoming good at PvP, and could lead to grand scale combat, which would be awesome, and would add that extra reason to keep playing. Because you could tie this into faction rewards and it could be fun. The devs are great. The biggest positive about the online aspect of the game is how fast the developers responded when people were complaining about the deep desert. People had been experiencing the game for probably all of their playtime as a PvE game, and this is mostly a PvE game. But now, suddenly, right at the end, they are forced into PvP, which sucks. And the developer said, okay, we'll make the experience better for you, and addressed the issue. Which to me is the biggest indicator of the potential of the game. The developers are actually listening to the players with an open mind. That holds a lot of promise for the game being better in the future. A lot of developers would have gone, no, fuck you, you're wrong. You're incel man babies, and we have a combined 200 years of dev experience, so we know better. And then the game just steadily gets worse. That's not the case here. Here they're coming from an angle of mutual respect and trying their best to make the game better. And I appreciate that. It's great and I look forward to seeing the future of the game. to see if this open mindset makes a better game. Story. In a single word, the story under-delivered. It feels like all the story aspects right now are just setup. I didn't play through all of it, but I did watch the rest on YouTube. The main storyline is you sniffing some spice and then tripping balls at some trial, where someone says some nonsense words and then says, "We drink the water and listen to the worm. Ixmail galubala." And then you do some platforming and power up or learn something. But you learn through these trials that, yeah, the Fremen got genocided by the Sardaukar. And you don't find the Fremen, by the way. It ends on a cliffhanger that an important person that I'm not spoiling will contact you once they learn more. So clearly the Fremen will come later, and there's no real resolution to the mystery of what's happening on Arrakis. Just a bit of information, with the can effectively kicked down the road. Not a lot of meat to chew on, but the class trainers are where you get your character stories. The story of the trooper trainer starts with you finding a fix for her because she's a drug addict. And she trades trooper lessons for drugs. There is an ethical dilemma in here that I'm ignoring because I want abilities. But then it turns into getting revenge on the people that enslaved her and made her a drug addict. And then you help her get off the drugs. The revenge story rings very hollow because the main enemy guy that enslaved her is just another generic enemy man that does nothing special and doesn't say anything. And like, sure, he doesn't know me, so why would he say anything? But you get some stuff for the trooper trainer and that instantly transforms her from a hopeless drug addict to upstanding citizen. We did a good thing here, but some recovery time after the surgery that makes her drug addiction go away would have made it less jarring and maybe more heartfelt or something. I don't know. The trainer stories are pretty good. My favorite one was the Mentat with a stutter, because he's obviously lost his mind and you just keep going along with what he wants to do anyway. Anything for more abilities. The worst part about the trainer stories and kind of the story in general is the travel time. For the trainer stories there is constant back and forth between the capital cities and the main area, which costs money. And then just the runs, like an hour back and forth trip for the missions, and that gets tiring. The story and characters are interesting, I want to see how they go, but the gameplay around progressing the story just becomes a huge hassle and I got tired of it. But I would be interested in seeing what they do with their alternate Dune timeline through YouTube. Story is decent. Conclusion. Dune Awakening is grind slop and I'm a dumb hamster person that falls for that. But if the gameplay loop is monotonous and doesn't keep itself fresh with some new mechanics or something that keeps it fun, then I'm gonna fall off. And I fell off because of the constant 30 to 60 minute running between places for loot that feels the same. And janky combat that barely evolves and never becomes interesting really. And the constant lag and crashing. It got to the point where the thought of playing the game more induces a gag reflex in my soul. And if I'm feeling this way about the PvE before I even get to the endgame and the PvP, then what would make me think that PvP and endgame would be any better? This happens with almost every multiplayer game, but I can't help but feel that this would be a better video game if it was a single player game. And this happens in pretty much every MMO, and especially in a crafting survival forced always online game like this. I just feel like every single aspect of the gameplay loop would have been more fun if it had been designed as a single player experience. This is especially true here since what annoyed me about the game and what made me want to stop playing was stuff connected to the online. The lag and the resource placement. I just have the suspicion it was designed in such a way to keep you grinding for longer. Also, a noteworthy mention is that if you want to play with your friend and you've both been playing on separate servers, then one of you will have to start over if you want to play together. I don't recommend Dune Awakening right now. I think it has the potential to be a really good game because there is good stuff in it, but it's also got a lot of bad. And the core gameplay loop will wear you down and make you sick of the game. And at the end game it doesn't get better. But there is hope for the game because the developers are working fast to make the game better. But for me, it's not enough. I think it's gonna be like a year or two before I give it another chance. Because playing it now has left a poor impression. So you should wait because this clearly isn't the best that this game could be. And feels kinda unfinished, especially since the story pretty much goes nowhere. I have faith that the game will get better because the developers have been faithful to Dune, and the way they've talked about Dune online leads me to think that this is a passion project for them, and you always put the extra effort in for the things you're passionate about. Just remember to wash out some of the jank. I give the game a magic 8-ball ask again later. Like and subscribe, call me Uncle Brian, and have a potentially good day.